everyone, it's John Heath here again for Milton Rose Learning with another Let's Learn lesson on the poem War Photographer by Carol Ann Duffy. Okay, so we are going around the world here. It's pretty horrendous, but we're going to do our best with it. We've got a section on the key context, so we'll work our way through that for you. Then we'll do a quick poetry reading of the poem and just get a feel for the language and Duffy's kind of use of imagery especially. And then we'll round off with poetry annotations, something just to kind of help you, guide you when you're writing in your anthology. So first off, let's look at the context. So we've got Carol Ann Duffy there looking very stern, and we have a war photographer here, so we're very much in a war zone. If you can see, for visual learners, you can see the background there. This is a destroyed kind of place, and war photographers work in some of the toughest places in the world. So let's look then first at the role of a war photographer. So this poem explores the emotional burden and the ethical dilemmas faced by photographers who have to document conflict and suffering. Can you imagine being a war photographer and you've just got to watch death unfold in front of you? It's absolutely horrendous. Comes with all sorts of ethical dilemmas, but also a massive crushing emotional burden. I can't imagine having to go through that and do that for an actual job. So kind of tough for them. So it explores media and the public awareness. So Duffy critiques in this poem how the media presents war images, and also how the public often becomes desensitized to this suffering. So by desensitized, we mean they've seen it so often they don't really care anymore. It doesn't have an emotional impact, and it's also distant, isn't it? So from the UK, where I live at the moment, we don't see war suffering. We don't, it doesn't happen in the UK, touch wood. So, but it happens in other places, and it's so far away that it's very difficult to kind of feel the full emotional force of it. And so the public has become desensitized to it, and Duffy critiques that. Also, the personal versus the political. The poem contrasts the photographer's private grief with the political violence that he's capturing. So it highlights the distance between the viewer and the reality. The photographer actually had to go and photograph all of these horrible, horrible things. But there's a distance, isn't there, between geographical and emotional, between the violence that he's seen face, or right in front of his face, and the suffering as we interpret it as a viewer, because obviously it's we're nowhere near it, and he's always trying to bridge that gap. Now we'll do a little poetry reading. Again, you can see kind of the imagery there of the kind of war photographer doing her thing there, very brave. Now, can we get it all in? Let's probably not. Let's do 2 and 2. Okay, so I'm going to have a nice read of this poem. Okay, it is quite a mature theme. Okay, so let's see what we can do with this. In his dark room he is finally alone, with spools of suffering set out in ordered rows. The only light is red and softly glows, as though this were a church, and he a priest preparing to intone a mass. Belfast, Beirut, Phnom Penh, all flesh is grass. So all those places were kind of once war zones. Okay, they've kind of improved and got safer now, but at the time, they've all been war zones in their history. He has a job to do. Solutions slop in trays beneath his hands, which do not tremble then, though seem to now. Rural England. So he's at home now, and he's actually kind of he's developing these photos ready to be printed. Home again to ordinary pain which simple weather can dispel, to fields which don't explode beneath the feet of running children in a nightmare heat. So he's very much back home now, but he's thinking still about the suffering that he saw. Third stanza. Something is happening. A stranger's features faintly start to twist before his eyes, a half-formed ghost. So what's happening is the photo of the war, it's starting to develop, so we can start to see the photo developing now. He remembers the cries of this man's wife, how he sought approval without words to do what someone must, and how the blood stained into foreign dust. Beautiful use of imagery there. 100 agonies in black and white, from which his editor will pick out 5 or 6 for Sunday's supplement. Look at the callousness and how harsh it is. He takes 100 pictures, and then the editor of the newspaper or the magazine just selects the 5 or 6 probably worst images. So it's real cynical stuff. The reader's eyeballs prick with tears between the bath and pre-lunch beers. From the aeroplane he stares impassively at where he earns his living, and they do not care. It's a real powerful ending, isn't it, where, you know, he earns his living from misery, from kind of being in a war zone, and they do not care. The public just, you know, tends to just get desensitized and not bother about this. Okay, so very hard-hitting poem. So let's try and give you some of the best annotations. You can see that's in his darkroom there. That's how photos used to get developed. Obviously things have changed now with digital and kind of smartphones and smart kind of tech, but that's how they used to get. You used to have to do it in a darkroom in the old school way. So at the opening lines then, in his darkroom he is finally alone. So the imagery and the setting of the darkroom suggest isolation and reflection. Nobody can ever know the suffering that he has seen because only he saw it, you know, and the darkroom symbolises that isolation. It contrasts the chaos of war with the calm of processing photographs, and it's also symbolism. Darkness mirrors the moral and emotional weight of the work. He almost lives in this kind of darkness, you know, this kind of shadow. The photographer's private confrontation with the horrors of what he's seen, only he can really understand, basically. Then we have the depiction of war. 100 agonies in black and white. What a line. That's a fantastic line of poetry. It's obviously a metaphor and imagery, so the photographs capture human suffering. Black and white, you can see in the image there, emphasises the starkness and the universality of pain. Okay, it really symbolises that, and if anything, it probably makes it worse. The alliteration and the rhythm of that line, I would say like 100 agonies, stresses the overwhelming scale of the trauma. Okay, 100 agonies, like 100 people dead, 100 kind of screams. It's just horrendous, absolutely horrific. And you're not even sure how the war photographer has survived and kind of actually not got post-traumatic stress disorder from this. The psychological impact, though, in the line, he remembers the cries of this man's wife, how he sought approval. Auditory imagery is used, so sound imagery, basically, to convey the human cost of war. It shows the photographer's emotional involvement. They have to be involved in this, even though they're desperately trying to emotionally detach. But unless you're, you know, a kind of monster, you're always going to attach because it's suffering, human suffering that you're seeing. Also, a contrast and moral questioning. It juxtaposes private suffering with the distant audience's indifference. Okay, the audience who read it in the magazines and the newspapers, they don't really feel the pain. They just have a flick of it and go, isn't that awful? And then put the newspaper down and then get on with their lives. Okay, so they're never fully invested emotionally in the suffering. Okay, and then number 4, the audience and the public response. So the reader's eyeballs prick with tears, so they start to kind of cry, but it's between the bath and pre-lunch beers. They've got their own life, so they might cry for a little bit and then they just get back on with their lives. So it's irony, and the tone there shows the casual, mundane lives contrast with the horrors of war, and it critiques public apathy, like we just don't really seem to care. To be honest, we just don't care at all. The metaphor and societal commentary then, the fleeting sympathy emphasises the disconnection between suffering or witnessing the suffering and any meaningful action. The public just looks at it and doesn't really do anything. They're kind of desensitised to the suffering. Okay, quite an emotional wallop there, but a really powerful poem, a very political poem by Carol Ann Duffy there, and hopefully that's just opened the door to you understanding war photographer. Don't forget to hit the like, subscribe and tap the bell icon as always to never miss another Let's Learn video again. We really appreciate your support. Always do feel free to as well to add any comments in, and we'll always do our best to reply. And it just remains to say it's been a pleasure, and take care, and we'll see you soon.